All right, so let's start. Let's make a bottle. Let's populate this crate with it, and in this we're going to try to model it, UV unwrap it, and then texture it all within this one video. So it kind of all comes together. So the first thing you're going to need to do is go and find some labels for whatever bottle you want to make. This can be a Coke, it can be a Sprite, it can be the Kirin bottles that we've kind of started with, whatever you want. And then you're going to place them and you're going to save them to source images, and we can put these still in logos because they're kind of logos. I just went ahead and saved a couple that I like, and I'll figure out kind of what I want to use later. Then I go ahead and make a library folder, so you can right click and put new folder, and then go in and why not make a bakes. So for all of the baking, ambient occlusion and stuff we're going to be doing, you can have that there. So new folder and bake. And then go find the bottle shape that you want. So I'm just going to be using this. I'm just going to, you can, whatever you can, you just want it to be a good kind of straight on view. Then right click on it, save image as, and place this in the image planes. So whatever bottle you want to. So Coca-Cola bottle has its own kind of shape. Whatever you're going to be using might have its own shape. If it's a wine bottle, it's going to have its own shape. So get something that you want to model on. All of this, anything we do is going to be able to be applied easy to any kind of bottle. So we're just going to be modeling the bottle, UV unwrapping it, and then placing a label on it, and then going into the AI standard shader and looking at some of the qualities of it. So I've already got my logo in here, and I got my image planes. So I'm going to bring in my image plane, and if you remember how we did that, before I do that, I'm going to go in and I'm going to select my crate, and I'm going to go to channel box, display, and I'll go to this last icon, create a new layer, and assign it, and then I'll double click on it. The same thing we did with the image plane. I'm just going to name this crate, save, and now I can just turn this off, and I still have kind of access to it, but I'm just going to turn that layer off because we don't need it, and I'm just going to keep my image planes as they are. I'm going to hit spacebar to bring this up. Remember, we want our image planes to be placed in an orthographic view, otherwise they'll just be put in the back of the perspective, and even when you rotate around they'll stay in the back of this, and it just doesn't make any sense. So I'm going to come to panels, view, image plane, view, image plane, import image. I'm going to go find my bottle, and it's in my image plane, so I'm going to grab my bottle image, bring it in, and it comes in pretty much centered, so I don't have to move it around or rotate it. You might have to do that like we did with the crate, depending on what you have, but I'm just going to leave this as is. I am going to move it back, press W, and move it back. And then I'm going to place this in my image planes layer. So I'm going to have my new image plane selected. I'm going to come over to image planes, hold down right mouse button. I'm going to go to add selected objects, and then that's going to add that selected object to this image layer in my image plane. So I can turn it on and off. I can keep it reference. And then I'm going to, let's go ahead and select this back image plane. I renamed it Crate Image Plane, so just double click on it, name it Crate Image Plane. And the good thing about this, working with layers, and kind of the confusing thing sometimes, is we can still use our display kind of hide and show options along with the display layer kind of view and unview options. So I'm going to keep these both on the same image planes. I just don't want to have a million different image planes, although you could do that if you want. And I'm just going to go into my crate image plane and select it, and then I'll just press H, and then that'll hide it. And if I want to see it, I can select it again, press H. So if I let go, you know it's hidden if it's grayed out, so I can unhide and hide it by pressing H. So I'm going to keep that hidden. I'll rename this bottle image plane, And then I will lower this alpha gain to 0.2 as well. And then I'm going to use this two view little option here. And it should go into your front view and your perspective view. If it doesn't, you can come up to panels and change it. Remember, orthographic front, and then come up here, panels, perspective, perspective. So then when we click off this, we can't select it. The alpha, we'll still be able to see when we put something new down. I'm going to get rid of these grids because I don't need it. And I'm going to just start off with a primitive, a cylinder, obviously, to kind of mimic this shape. Something like that. I'm going to come up here to wireframe mode so I can kind of see it. And then I'm just going to scale it to something like that. Where it's kind of, this is the very top, this is the very bottom. I know that's all I'm going to be doing on the object level, so I'm just going to go ahead now and freeze the transformations. So I don't, when I start UV mapping, it just kind of automatically is going to obey this new image scale. So I'm going to freeze transformations. It's going to lock all that kind of into place. And then I'm just going to go in and start adding, let's see. I will, let's see, no, you know what? I will scale it just a little bit on this XY plane to get it to where I kind of want it to be more accurately. Then I'll go in, freeze transformations. And then I can press right click and, no, you know what? I'm going to go into my modeling toolkit and I'll just start adding edge loops to this. So I'll get rid of my outliner, and then I can see here I'm going to need like 2 more loop cuts here. So I'll hit Control. Something about here and here. And I'll need a loop cut. I'm going to put one like here right where the label is. Kind of in, so this is where I can just put all of my, the label is going to be where that UV kind of is, that UV matte. And then up here I'm going to add one where this curve starts, one where it ends, one where it kind of bows out right here, and then one where this little, let's see, where it kind of stops, being concave right there. And then one just before it bows out here on this little detail. One at the apex of that little detail. And then the same kind of deal for this top. And something like that should be okay. We can go in and change things as we see fit. So I'm going to come to the bottom and do the bottom first. And I'm just going to grab all of my vertices for this. And I'm going to grab these bottom 2 rows, and I'll hit R over here, and I'll be scaling it on the Z and X, this plane, and I'll bring that in a bit. Up. Make sure that camera-based selection is off. I don't know why that's on for me. To make sure it's grabbing all the vertices, and then I'll scale this in a bit. Something like that. And then I'll grab this bottom one, scale that in even more, and then hit Y, maybe bring it up a little bit. Maybe not scale it out so much. And so that's the bottom of my bottle. I'll come up here. These can stay the same. I'm going to grab all of these, all of this top area here, scale these in on the plane, on just the XZ plane. I'm going to zoom in to see exactly where I'm hitting my points. And you see how this is kind of bowing out a little bit because it's not quite a straight line. That's when, if you were doing a high resolution model, you could go in and add loops there. And we're just going to leave this kind of as is. I'm going to go in a little bit more. To something maybe like that. I'm going to select all these and bring this up a bit. Something like that. And then I'm going to grab these edges that kind of bow out a bit. and maybe scale it out just a bit. Grab these other ones. So this process is just like, so a lot, your modeling is a lot of times going to consist of grabbing components and then manipulating them on an individual basis. I just want to get this little bow looking thing, and then I'll go up and grab the top one and I'll scale all of those in to this point, something like that. And so we do have this little bow here. That's looking good. So now I'm going to just grab this little edge ring where this little detail is here, where it kind of like, it bows out a bit. I'm just going to scale that out. And then this last part, I'm going to bring this down a little bit, where the cap is going to protrude a little bit more than it normally would, or where the bottle ends, and maybe even more. Something new about like that seems reasonable. And then I'm going to grab this other one and then scale that out a bit. And that's the basic shape I need. So I'm just going to go with this. I'm going to go into face mode, and I am going to delete these, right? If I select it as is, it will select these. So now I need to go back to camera-based selection, turn that on, so I don't select things behind this, and then I'll press delete. You can see it did not delete things behind it, so that's good. I'm going to double click on my objects, select everything, and then I'm going to extrude everything, thickness of -1, and lock that in. We'll need to do the same thing that we did with the crate. I'll come up to mesh display and reverse these normals so they're not, so we can see them. And I'm going to grab these inside edges here, scale those out a tiny bit, and then bring them up a tiny bit. And that's going to be my bottle. You could go in and, let's see, maybe this top part isn't quite as, oh, look, got to go back into my selections, turn that off. Camera-based selection, turn that off. I'm going to scale this just a bit in. There we go. All right, so that's my bottle. And all right, I'm going to go with this. So I've extruded it. I've kind of manipulated the components to kind of get what I want. And of course, once you're working on high poly models, you could go in and bevel these edges and get much smoother kind of transitions, add segments, but we're not going to do that. I'm just going to keep this kind of low poly. All right, so we're done with the modeling. I'm going to come over to my UV editor, UV editing kind of pre-space. I'm going to come over here, and you can see it's done a pretty good job right off the bat. We can use our checker display, turn that on and off to see what we're kind of dealing with. So the main thing I'm going to use is this for my label, so that's the only thing I really care about. And I also want it to be in this top fourth section over here because our crate's going to be occupying here and here, since we're trying to use one UV map for, or one texture for all of our UV maps, since it is low poly. I'm going to grab my faces, and I'm going to select these, and then move this over. And so this is the inside, right, of the bottle, and I don't need any detail there, so I'm just going to scale this very small. The same thing with the bottom of the bottle. I'm going to grab this, and it's going to be the inside or the outside. So this is the inside of it. I'll move this over here, and then this is going to be the bottom of it here. I'm going to bring these over. I'll hold shift and select this other one, and then I'll hit R so they're both selected, and I'm going to scale them both down to something that's just very small. I don't really need them at all either. And I can leave them kind of as is. I could even put these on top of each other if I wanted to, because we don't really need, they can be overlapping. So the main thing I want to do is grab these faces here, and then cut this here and cut this out. So I'm going to come into my UV toolkit, and I'll grab this edge here. I can do it on my model as well. This is where the label is going to go, on these two, in between these two little cuts. And I'm going to say cut, and then I'm going to move this over to the side. So that's going to be where most of my detailing is going to be. This little portion down here is not going to need any detailing either. So I'm going to scale this down and move this over here. And then this portion here, this is where the main labeling is going to go. So I'm going to keep this as is, and let's see, let me bring this up. There's a little bit of distortion there, but for the most part, it looks pretty good because it's already a cylinder. And if I would go in and try to unfold this, it would just make a mess, more of a mess, even though it would get rid of this distortion. The trade-off would be, it would be a bad trade-off, because if I come in here and look at this, now my UVs are all sideways and everything, and if I'm trying to put a label on this, I'd have to be in Photoshop and warping it and bending it. So in this case, this is one of the cases where I'm just going to leave this kind of as is and just work on getting this portion here not as distorted as it is. So I'm just going to grab this top part and stretch it out a bit so this little medium part has these squares line up a little bit better. So all I did was grab this top part and move it, and then I'll grab this bottom part, let's see, and then one more. I'll hold shift and add to this selection, one more little area, and then I'll work on getting this little area a little bit more squared by pulling that down just a bit. So that's it. That's all I need. Just to where this section here, when I look on the checkered map, has better squares. That's all I needed to do for that. And then down here it seems to be pretty square. I could maybe even hit scale and scale it along the X a bit to make it a little bit more square. And that's good. Alright, so this is going to be my UVs. So I'm going to grab all of this, and I'm going to come up to modify, layout, and hit the layout item or option. Remember, you want 6 padding, at least 6 padding. And for shell distribution, I'm going to go, packing region, I'm going to go to, instead of top left, I'm going to go to top right. And that's going to pack it in this little area. I'm going to hit apply. You can see it's moved everything over here. This is exactly kind of what we want. We'll double check. Alright, the only thing we're looking for is this area and this area. That's where our labeling would go. And that's pretty good. So I'm just going to leave this as is. You can see this has been, really large, but we don't really need anything right there. If we needed to, we could scale it, but nothing's going to be put on that. Alright, so that's it. So that's our UV mapping for our cylinder or for our bottle, and you can see we're just using the base cylinder that already came with the bottle. If for some reason you accidentally deleted yours, you can always just go in and just start over. I'm just going to be able to, I'm going to save this before I do this. Let me save this as, I'm going to save this as a new iteration, new incremental save, Valley 1, 2. But if you accidentally deleted that, you can always go into create and start anew and go to cylindrical, right? And it's going to do it's going to do something very similar to what the primitive came out as being. And then if you needed to, you could just come in and work on the bottom, but we wouldn't even need the bottom, and then you could just start working with your UV map in the same way, and then just working on that section, and then going up here and working on these sections, since that's the only thing you would need for this bottle. But we are just used the primitive map that came with it. All right, so now we can just export this out. Right, so let's go and grab our object, and then we can go to Tools, Image, UV Snapshot, we'll click that. We want it as a PNG 2048 by 2048, and then I'll again make the edge color something besides white or black, something that'll stand out. And I'll hit, since I already did one, I'm going to just say UV Bottle 2. And I'll export that, and you can see it's now in Ali Japan Images UV Bottle 2.png. So we'll minimize Maya for now. All right, I'm going to go ahead and open up my Crate Color PSD. Remember, we made the PSD document from which we exported the JPEG, so we could always go back to this master document and make adjustments and then export our JPEGs or PNGs. I'm going to open up Crate Color document. You should see something like this. I'm going to grab all of these layers here, and I'm going to put these in a group. So if I select all of them, I'm going to create a new group out of this, and I'll call this the crate group, and I can turn it all on, all off. I will go in and undo this wireframe. So this is what we exported as a JPEG. I'm going to come back into my images and grab my UV Bottle 2. I'm going to bring it over and just drop it into this, and you can see it lines up perfectly with that. So you can see our UV now. Our UVs are, we put this in the top left, bottom left, top right. So they're starting to should be starting to kind of make sense. I'm going to click on this and name it wireframe bottle. You can name it something like that as long as you wireframe bottle. And then to start off with, I'm going to make a background of this. So or a background for just the bottle part. So I'm going to come up here and click on the background, drag it beneath, and I'll put this as bottle back. And then I'm going to use my marquee tool up here to drag out a rectangle, and I'll make it to where it hits the kind of pink lines to where it hits the middle. Yeesh. Like that, just this side of the square. And then I'm going to come down to my bottle. I'm going to grab kind of bluish color. Brownish color. I'm going to just paint this in over here. And that's going to be the bottle color. I'm going to bring in my, let's see, I'll just zoom in on this part. See what we're working with. I'm going to bring in my labels now. I'm going to look at them to see which one I want to use. You can use whatever you want, remember. And if you're doing like a clear Coke bottle, you don't need to put this this color in there. You can just you can paint that white. Let's see, source images, logos. So I'm going to just flip through these. It's kind of low res, so I like the writings, but one's easy, that one's a little, I'm just going to go with this one to make it simple. So I'm going to grab this bottle label 2, and I'm going to bring it over into my space. I'm going to drop it, and it's at 100 right now, so I'm going to hit enter, and you can see it's made it a smart object. I'm going to go ahead and take my marquee tool here and a little bit inside, so just make sure to cut off the grid I'll marquee select that and then press this masked tool. You can see it's cut everything off. And I'm just going to go with that. It's cut everything off, so I'm going to hit right mouse button on this, and I'm going to say, right mouse button here and say, rasterize layer. And then that'll get rid of the smart object. And I'm going to go in here and apply, now that I've rasterized it, apply this layer mask by right-clicking on the mask, and then hit apply layer mask. I'm going to turn it right back into a smart object by right-clicking on the space out here, and then go to convert to smart object, and you can see it's a smart object by this icon. This is going to allow me to scale it in, then let it go, and then scale it out, and it'll hold its original dimensions because it's actually in. I double click on this little thing. It's actually in its own little .psb file in here. So that'll keep its original dimensions, so I can bring it down here and kind of scale it. And then I want to place it in the middle, so I'll bring it below the wireframe and then lock my wireframe so I'm not kind of hassling with it. And I'm just going to count my polygons. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, that's about right in the center actually. So I'll bring it over a bit, and I'll bring it to about there on the bottle, and that should kind of line up. So let me make sure. Let's see. I think I can make it a little bit bigger if I hold down, or if I rescale it. I think it can be about something like that. You know what, maybe a little bigger. Okay. Then I'm going to duplicate this. And I can right click on it and duplicate it. And I'm going to bring that duplication up here. And I'm going to mask out this portion. Like that, and then on this duplicated layer I'll hit that, and I'm going to use this as, I'll rasterize this as well, so right click, rasterize, right click. You know what, before I rasterize it, go back, undo, and then bring this to 100%, and then enter. Could go a little over 100, rasterize it, apply the layer mask, and now we're going to bring this a little bit up. Okay, that's looking like, I'm just counting the polygons on either side to make sure it's kind of even. You can always come back in and fix these. Alright, so this is going to be the label at the top, this is going to be the label at the bottom, and if we get rid of our wireframe, this is kind of what we're going to have. And I'm going to put one more layer, empty layer down here. I'm going to save this out first. You know what? This little area is kind of annoying me, so I'm going to take a lasso tool and cut off that little bottom part, and the label will just be a little bit imperfect, and I'll hit delete. I'm going to go with this, turn off my wireframe, and then this is going to be my color map, so I'll go to, I'll save this as create color, and then save as, I'm going to just put this as props, since we're starting to combine them all, props color, JPEG. So now we have that saved out, and now I'm going to start working on the transmission mask. So I'm going to grab all of my wireframe stuff, because I'm going to start grouping these, and I'm going to grab all of these, I'm going to put this in a group, and I'll name this bottle. Then I'll drop this down, and grab, just leave everything but my wireframe out. And I'll grab all of these and, or sorry, grab everything but the last layer and grab the 3 bottle colors that I made, and I'm going to duplicate these. Duplicate. And the ones I duplicated, I'll just turn those, I'll hit the folder down here to turn those into a subgroup of the group, and I'll call it bottle color. And then I can turn that on and off. So I'm going to turn that off to see what I'm kind of working with right now. And then I'm going to grab all these other ones, and so the ones I duplicated from, group those, and I'll call this bottle TRAN. And if I take those off, I can still have my color, but this is going to be the transmission layers that I'm working on. So I'm going to grab this layer 3 and come down and make a completely black, color, and I'll paint that in as completely black so the crate won't get any transparency added to it if for some reason we need to use that as, or whatever. I'm going to come to my bottle black, and I'm going to double click on the bottle black layer and bring up my layer styles, and I'm going to make this color overlay, make it completely white because it's going to be 100% transmission, so it's going to be glass so you can see through it. I'm going to come to this bottle label, I'm going to go to my color overlay and make that completely black because it's not going to have any opacity to it. I'll do the same thing with this little label, make it completely black. So that's going to be my transmission mask, and then this is my color mask. So I'm just going to save this and export this out as, or I'll just save it as, I'll save it as props TRAN, make it a JPEG, hit OK, and then that's okay with that. So then I'm going to save this I'll save this Photoshop document, and I can go back into Maya. All right, let's get this bottle textured. So we're going to go through the same rigmarole. We're going to select our object. We're going to go assign it a new material. We're going to pick AI standard surface. Let's name this bottle. Here's standard surface. And before we do this, let's go to Safari, type in HDRIHaven.com, and it'll allow us to get HDRI images. This is really good for doing your final surfacing of your objects. So an HDRI image is going to be a high dynamic range image, and it can actually light your scene. So these are free ones. I'm going to go and pick just the studio small, and I'm going to download the 4K version. You can pick from any one of these. If you go into HDRIs, I just went to studio, and I'm going to pick studio small. Look at that. I'm going to go to downloads. I'll copy. I'll go back, source images, and I'll paste this HDRI. And then I'll be able to select that in my source images for my sky dome light. And when I click that open, you can see it puts it in the background, right? I select it, you can see what's happening. It's just an inverted sphere with my sky dome on it. And so that's good. So now with this sky dome selected, let's put this in the channel box so we're not accidentally selecting it with display layers. Come over here, put that in there, and then name this Sky Dome, and then save it. And then we'll turn that on to a reference R so we're not accidentally picking it. And you can see kind of what it's doing if you come down to Arnold. And it might take a little while to initialize once you put in the HDRI. And so this is what's happened. It's you can see it's picking up actual lights from the texture image, and this doesn't really work with JPEGs or anything, but with an HDRI it does. So this is what we're going to be using mainly to texture our bottle. So let's go into the main thing we're going to be using is going to be the hyper shader. And to show you kind of what's going on with the hyper shader, we'll bring it up and I will select my bottle material, and then I'll hit this input output button to clean everything up, and you can see this is our standard shader. I can use the same thing, so this right here is the same thing as the attribute editor on, you know, my normal view, but in the hyper shader this is going to be where everything is like spaced out to where you can start working on your actual materials. And we have nodal access to everything. So you see base here is going to be base weight, base color is going to be base color, so it has everything here lined up. So if we come over here and select our color, right, we were going to just apply our color just like we did for the crate. I'll hit the checkered marker and I'll hit File. So what's actually happening is now you can see kind of under the hood what has been going on this whole time is it's hooking up these nodes, a file node and the UV map node to this standard shader node. We're not really seeing that when we use just the attribute editor, so the hyper shader gives us a whole lot better representation of what's really going on. So I'll click my file in the same way in my hyper shader as in my attribute, and under the folder, so I just click my file 4 node. It might be file 1 or whatever it is for you, and I'm going to go to my folder and click this, and then I'm just going to go to props color. I'm going to bring this down, and then if we go back and look at our model, we can see that that has been applied to our bottle. So that's, you know, starting to get there. Now we can start working with these other attributes, and you can see because of the HDRI it's already starting to look pretty good. So what's another thing we can do is go down to our transmission, because we made that TRAN mask. So for weight, I'm going to bring in that that mask that we made. So if I click this checker button and bring up File, you can see it automatically assigns these. The trick with this is we're not using an alpha mask for this. We're using a grayscale image. You can use either. So in all of these little red nodes, that means you're looking for an RGB channel, so a complete, you know, a 3-channel input. For all the green ones, you're looking for a 1-channel input. So if we drop down our color and we split this into RGB, you know, R is going to be a grayscale, G is going to be a grayscale, B is going to be a grayscale. So I'm just going to go in and reconnect my red. It doesn't matter because all of these are the same because it's just a black and white image. I'm going to plug that into my transmission, and I'm going to click on the transmission mask node file, and I'm going to go find it. And props tran, it just looks like this, right? Black and white grayscale image. I'll click open, and now you can see back in this view the bottle is now clear, and the label is now, you know, not clear. We can see through it, and it's looking pretty good. So now we're just going to kind of detail this to where we want to get it to where we want to get it. So the first thing we're going to do, and if you accidentally drop your hyper shader in, just, you know, pull off the tab. First thing we're going to do is bring this IOR, incidence of refraction, to 1.55. We'll go over these values in a different on a different day to go in depth onto all what these can do, but we're just going to be using just the ones we need to finish this bottle so we don't get kind of convoluted. So then that's going to be, this color instead of the alpha is going to be driving the transmission amount. So then we can also, because that's using the weight, the weight is being driven by a grayscale, we can go in and assign a color. So I'm going to go in and assign, you know, this is not clear. I'm doing a kind of brownish bottle, so I'm going to assign it a kind of brownish tint. I guess we'll start with something like that. I'm going to bring my roughness down to 0 right now because it's glass. And you still see it's kind of way too kind of white. So I'm going to bring my, oh no, sorry. Color for specular we want to be completely white. Color for transmission is what we want that brown to be. And now you can see it's starting to, so I want to be able to texture this without having to kind of keep touching, grabbing this thing. So I'm going to go up to show. I'm going to turn off selection highlighting in my show viewport. I'm going to turn off show selection highlighting so I can see my actual texturing. And you can see this is already kind of starting to look like a pretty good beer bottle or brownish beer bottle. One thing I am going to do is give it a depth to where it scatters a little bit and makes it a little lighter, because this is a little bit too brown. If you see reference pictures, when light shines through it, it looks kind of yellow. So we're going to start with a low value like 0.1, because our scale is very small. And that's still, I'm going to go up to 0.2. That's what we want. So the light is kind of coming through kind of yellow, but then when it's not on it, we get that brown kind of hue. So for me, this is working. I'm going to go with this. And then scatter, I'm going to bring that up just barely, just because I feel like no glass that is tinted doesn't have kind of scatter. And we'll go over those, what exactly that's doing in a more in-depth tutorial. But that's starting to look pretty good. That's starting to look like an empty beer bottle. I might bring this down a little bit to something like that. And then for my, let's see, I'll leave all that as is. Bring it down even more. Now it's starting to get kind of peach. You see the values are tweaked very quickly at this scale. Let me go to 0.2 and bring it up more towards maybe a yellowish hue. And leave it at 0.2. Okay, that's looking pretty good. I'm gonna go with this for right now. But you can see that this HDRI is really giving me a good feel for what this bottle needs to be looking like. I'm going to bring my specular all the way down to 0. And because instead of specular, we're going to use something similar with specular highlights, but we're going to use the coat. So if I use specular and I add roughness, it's going to add, the actual reflections are going to get rough, but also since we're using transmission, the transmission inside the bottle will get rough, like so. Let me get it on something like this. So if we can kind of see through it. If I bring this roughness up, it's going to make the reflections on the specular and the reflections within the glass kind of rough to where you get this frosted glass. So we don't want that. This extra roughness down here in transmission is only going to affect the frosted glass look, and it'll leave the kind of highlights on your glass kind of still sharp. So that'd be like a frosted glass, but with very high specularity. So we don't really want that either. We want to come down and we want to use coat. So this is going to affect only the specularity, these little highlights that we see, and it's going to leave the glass actually clear. Because what we're about to do is add fingerprints to this glass to kind of make it look realistic. So let's go in our material editor. So we just have these two little nodes hooked up to this. And this is going to be our transmission mask. And so we want to also drive this specularity, right? So the bottle is extremely polished, but we don't want our labels polished because they're paper. So we can just use this this transparency map to kind of drive that, and we don't need to go and do another one. So if we bring this in and we drive the coat weight, right? Since this is right, just a grayscale image, it's going into a green there. We can just bring it into our coat image. We can see that it's going to be doing the same thing. So it's not on the label now, it's not specular at all, and then on the bottle it is. So it kind of, we see this little shiny part on the bottle stop right when we get to the label. So that's what we want. But we don't want it totally cutting out. So we're going to add what is kind of common. We're going to add an AI range. So type in AI range in this search box. And then bring that down. And we are going to bring the entire color into this. And we'll bring this out, and we'll just use the red coming out of this. And this is going to allow us to kind of drive up. With it selected now, we can use this. So this is going to allow us to kind of drive. We want a little bit of this label to be a little bit specular. So let's pull up the input a little bit. That's not it. Let's put up the output max to like 0.276, maybe a little bit less. And that's bringing the lowest blacks up to at least 0.27. So the bottle is staying exactly as is, but now we can see that the label has a little bit of specularity, but not near as much as the bottle. So that's about right. So I let it at 0.69 just so it has a little bit there on the range that's going into that. All right. Now, the last thing we're going to do is we're going to add some roughness to this coat. And for that, we're going to go in and type in texture fingerprints. And we'll just take this first one. These are free as well. No, wait, are they? That's not what we want. Back out. We want the free stuff. Here we go. Let's click this. First little image from CG Bookcase. Let's right click on it. Save image as. And let's bring this into Source Images Library. And we just want the entire thing. Fingerprint, Source Images Library. So we could go into Photoshop and start mapping on these fingerprints. But we don't really need to do that because it'll also give us the flexibility to kind of tile these. So let's go to our coat and let's go to roughness. It's at 100 now. Let's click on this little checker mark here, go to File, and then let's go find in our library. And the reason it's in library is because we're not going to actually be bringing this into Photoshop. We're going to use it as is. So that's the deal with that. You can also see that it's brought it in as an alpha. We don't want to do that. We need to bring it in as just a grayscale image. So I'm going to plug in the R to the coat roughness. And if I swarm around the bottle now, you can see it's adding roughness on little areas. You see how the little highlights are now kind of rough? So that's what we want. But I also want to go into my UV and I want to, like, let's say repeat UV. I want to do it at least twice on the horizontal, twice on the vertical, and that's just increasing how many times it's repeated within my UV map twice, so it's quadrupling the resolution. And you can see now the fingerprints are a whole lot smaller. And I could probably, you know what, that's looking good. I'm just going to leave it at twice. And then we want it to be, and it's probably driving on this map down here. So what we want for the roughness of the label is we want it to be less shiny, and we want to keep these fingerprints on the bottle. So how we're going to do that is we're going to have to combine two channels for this coat roughness. So to do that, I'm going to bring in a blend colors node. So type in blend and bring in this blend colors node. It's going to drop down this. And I'm going to bring in my color, right? I'm going to take this off and I'm going to bring in my color to color 2 for this. And then in the first one, I'm going to bring, this is going to be what the label is. Value of the label for its roughness. So I'm going to bring down, let's see, I don't want it to be totally rough, but something about like 6.52, slightly gray. And when I plug this in, the R channel, you can see what's going on. So I've plugged this in, and let's see, I got it. So now it's blending it kind of in 2 to where you can't really tell. So I want the fingerprints to just be on the bottle, and I want this color, light gray color, to just be on these labels. And I can use this blender down here with what I've already made with this trans mask, and I'm going to just use that to tell this blend colors where to put the fingerprints and where to put this this gray value to make the roughness of the label. So if I bring this R down here and plug it into the blender, you can see, oh, it's the opposite. So now we need to do this. I'm going to leave this all like it is, and I'm going to add, we need to flip these values, and instead of going into Photoshop and inverting our trans mask, I can just use a quick reverse node. So this is extremely handy. In Blender, it's going to be called the invert node. So I'm going to bring my input in here, my color input in here, and I'll bring my output output X, which is going to be my R channel, in here. And now it's going to have flipped those around. So now this is all shiny. The label is barely shiny because of that roughness. And we have the fingerprints on there. So it looks kind of like a dirty kind of bottle. So that's it. And you can see those fingerprints really add some kind of texture to everything. They really give it some realism. And those are the things that really separate, great texturing from kind of mediocre texturing. And if we wanted to bring up and control the values of the fingerprints, we could do the same thing with an AI range. We could bring in one more range and then plug in the color of the fingerprints into the color here, and then bring the color there, and then play with the values of this to where we can see them more or less. So maybe, see if I bring that down, you can see the smudge marks get more prominent. You can see all up and down here they get more prominent, but also if I bring up the output of the minimum, it'll start making it all a little bit more prominent. I'm going to end with something like that. That's looking pretty good. All right, so we got some, we used a transmission mask to apply where it's going to be see-through, where it's not going to be see-through on the label. We added a color label. We added, we worked with the transmission qualities. We added fingerprints, and then divided those up with a blend color, so it controls that the fingerprints are only on, the roughness of the fingerprints are only on the bottle. And then just a solid color of roughness is on the label. So we still have specularity on the label, but it's still kind of rough like paper. And all of these things you could go in and tweak to your liking. All right, the absolutely last thing is going to be to make sure that this gets the right kind of light that actually shines through it. You just want to make sure that your object is selected, right? And then come to your attribute editor and then go to, you know, your bottle shape 1, and then come down to Arnold, and then unclick opaque. So this is going to allow light to shine through it, like for instance within the crate, and get the exact colors of the shadows, so it doesn't just look like a solid object is casting a shadow, but it's going to be calculating the light that passes through the object, and make your shader just very real. So select your object and then click off of opaque, and that's it. We're done.